This morning we're going to concentrate on the life of Elijah and possibly Elisha, and there's lots of drama in his life, and I wanted to read to you the most famous story, if you like, in the life of Elijah, the contest on Mount Carmel. So from 1 Kings 18, verses 20, I'm going back to verse 20. So Elijah went up to the crowd and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him." The people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls, let them choose one for themselves, let them cut it in pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I'll prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I'll call on the name of my God. And the God who answers by fire, he is God." The people said, "What you said is good." So Elijah said to the people of Baal, prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls, prepare it first, call on the name of your God, but don't light the fire." So they took the bull, given to them, and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till night. "Oh, Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they'd made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. He's asleep. Perhaps he's deep in thought. Or maybe he's traveling. He must be asleep. Wake him up." So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time of the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one said anything. Then Elijah said to the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which was in ruins. He took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, dug a trench round it, large enough to hold 2 gallons of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the wood into pieces, laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water and put it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and he did it a 3rd time. The water ran down the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today, you are God of Israel, and I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water. Then all the people saw this. They fell prostrate and said, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." And now for our New Testament reading.
The New Testament reading is from Matthew 17. I'm reading from verses 1 to 13. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and the brothers James and John and led them up a high mountain where they were alone. As they looked on, a change came over Jesus. His face was shining like the sun, and his clothes were dazzling white. Then the 3 disciples saw Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. So Peter spoke up and said to Jesus, "Lord, how good it is that we are here. If you wish, I'll make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was talking, a shining cloud came over them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my own dear Son, with whom I am pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard the voice, they were so terrified that they threw themselves face downward on the ground. Jesus came to them and touched them. "Get up," he said, "don't be afraid." So they looked up and saw no one there but Jesus. As they came down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Don't tell anyone about this vision you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from death." Then the disciples asked Jesus, "Why do the teachers of the law say that Elijah has to come first?" "Elijah is indeed coming," answered Jesus, "and he will get everything ready. But I tell you that Elijah has already come, and the people did not recognize him, but treated him just as they pleased. In the same way, they will also ill-treat the Son of Man." Then the disciples understood that he was talking to them about John the Baptist.
I must say I've been very impressed by the very courteous way in which your colleagues have worked with me. All my emails have been readily answered, and I've been very impressed with the way that you have prepared for this service. So thank you very much indeed. I got these Bible notes to begin the new year, and they're all about Elijah. And I grew to question a lot about Elijah and to think a lot about him. So I'm sharing my thoughts today. They may not always be straightforward, but there you go. But let's think about Elijah, a man of God, a miracle man living in a very pagan culture. Now, when I started thinking about Elijah, I didn't realize that I was really letting myself, I was hovering over a hornet's nest. Some of those miracles, what do you make of them? The climate, climate, well, there you go. The climate today, the number of miracles. So I'm not going to evade the issue, but I will just try and comment about it. Now, a quick bit of background about the story, which I imagine you know. Elijah was one of the prophets, one of the first prophets. His role was to challenge the King Ahab. Now, Ahab married Jezebel, who was a Baal worshipper. And Baal was known for the god of the climate and the god of the harvest. And as you would know, there were, at that particular time, many gods, many altars, and the people of God, the Israelites, the Jews as we know them today, were attracted to some of the activities of Baal. But they tried to have a put in both camps. And Elijah's task was to challenge them. And from the reading I said, how long will you halt between two opinions? If it's Baal, okay. If Baal's your God, serve him. But if Yahweh, Jehovah is your God, serve him. You can't do both. Now, I don't want to press beyond common sense comparisons. That's dangerous, I know that. But I did think maybe there are some links of comparison between the story here and where we are today, here in England, 2020. Now, if you think I've gone too far, please tell me afterwards, because I'm still thinking this one through. We're living in two cultures, aren't we? You and I are members of the kingdom of heaven. We may have been baptized or whatever initiation ceremony we had. We are church members, but citizens of the kingdom of heaven. And so we obey King Jesus. We are also citizens of Swanage, Dorset, Great Britain, and we pay our council tax, obey the laws of this country. But there are times when the two don't work very easily together. And I've just pushed out some of the areas where there may be difficulties. And I'm going to try not to push my point of view, but at least to share with you my thinking. The whole matter of abortion, which has gone on, and as you know, there are very different opinions. What's right? The growing issue of gender. Now, it's interesting that yesterday's Telegraph, page 3, the whole page was given to Philip Schofield's announcement that he's gay. That was news. And I think I'm right in saying that when it was first announced Friday, it was the first item of BBC News, I think. Now, that could be wrong, but it was certainly prominent. It's a big issue. In our schools today, in the primary schools in Swanage, by government law, teachers have to teach gender issues. And I forget, I think it's September, but from a given date, parents do not have the right to withdraw their children. Now, that may be an issue whereby we as Christians say, God made them male and female. And I don't know the answers, but here are issues that we need to think about. And I'm suggesting also that we live in an era of postmodernism. There are no absolutes. I will do what I think is right. Now, if I do something that is wrong, hurts you, that's wrong. But you can't throw the book at me and say, that's the law. So there we have a number of issues that I think are relevant today and not very dissimilar from the story of Elijah. So, here we are. Here's the situation. Elijah says, okay, let's sort this out once and for all. Go for the God that works. And so he set up this particular incident. Here was the altar, Baal altar, Jehovah altar, no water. You do your praying, I'll do my praying. And if you remember, if you heard the oratorio Elijah, you'll remember some of the noise that was made. Please. Where's the noise, please? Elijah. Didn't know you sing that. I sang that at the Lighthouse about 5 years ago with Simon Lowell and the augmented choir. There we are then, Baal or God. And John Drain, you've heard of John Drain, the Old Testament scholar, he outlines Elijah's position very clearly. He believed that the God with whom he knew and worshipped was not just a God who had lived and worked in the past. He was the God who was present with his people here and now, and who had his own understanding of the important issues in their national life. So there is Elijah standing up for belief and trust and commitment to God. Now, I think we need to understand, first of all, we're looking at a very different culture. And it's quite difficult when we've got 21st century spectacles with our understanding of climate. Now, I'm married to a geographer, and we discuss climate time and time again, and she assures me that it's due to laws, and I have to listen to that as an obedient husband, of course. But this whole issue of climate, Elijah prayed that there be a drought for 3 years. Now, I don't know what to make of that one, but I'll leave that one for you to think through. But what was Elijah really doing? Elijah was saying, I want the people to understand that God is the greatest and God does miracles. And today, as we've seen, we live in a culture with very, very different values. We have also already mentioned some of the issues that maybe there are challenges for us to think through. Not Baal, but 21st century postmodernism, 21st century making money. I forget who was it said, I live, therefore I am, cogito ergo sum, and some wag has translated that, Tesco ergo sum, I shop, therefore I am. Now, we do live in a culture where money, spending money, borrowing money, debt is an issue. And somebody would know that there are people in Swanage who have really big debt issues. So here are the issues that I want us to leave with you. Now, this is a plug, and I don't apologize for it, but any questions does try to address some of these issues. And we have looked, for example, at the whole matter of the media, social media. We looked at homosexuality. Nick Viney did a very useful session on his understanding of homosexuality. And what we're trying to do is to unpack these issues Christianly. So can I leave with you this first thought? Here are a number of issues in our society today. When you go out of those doors, they're there. What is your thought-through opinion as a Christian on some of these matters? Let's move on. Elijah then had great depression. After the mountaintop experience when he was, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God, they all said. And where was Elijah? He pushed off because he was depressed. And that's not uncommon, is it? Now, circumstances do cause you and me today to have periods of depression. It could be health. It could be getting old. Now, I'm going to be 87 on Sunday, and I'm recognizing that I can't do what I used to do. And my family bully me because they say I'm doing too much. And I say I want to keep going, but I'm getting older. And I have to have a stick to get up those stairs now. And that could cause depression. Maybe you've got family issues. Now, may I very clearly say, I want you to hear this if you hear nothing else. Being depressed is not a sin. It's not wrong. Because I remember when I was teaching at Avery Hill, the principal was a very, very clever woman indeed. But she went through periods of enormous depression. And we then had to say, Kathleen, it's not that you've done something wrong, so don't think this is a sin. And I think we as a Christian community are waking up to how we as a church respond to people with depression, how we respond to people who are suicidal. And Any Questions has got a session in June devoted to that. But there you are. I just have to leave this question with you. Perhaps we need to remind ourselves that it's not wrong. And Elijah was told, Elijah, don't be daft. There are 700 prophets of God. You're not on your own, mate. And maybe sometimes you feel, oh dear, we're struggling at URC and we don't have the young people. And I can remember when we had lots of young people. I can remember the boys' brigade and the girls' brigade, and it's all changed. Yes, but may I tell you that in London now, is it Holy Trinity Brompton will have 5 services in one day because our numbers are so great. Now, our son Philip worships there, and they run Alpha courses time after time after time. Last Sunday, I was in All Souls Church in Langham Place. They now have to have 3 services on a Sunday because the crowds are so great. So if you feel, folks, that you're just a few, okay, God doesn't count because he wants to get scores. And do remember that you are part of a worldwide church. So the second thing I want to say to you is if you sometimes feel you're a bit depressed, then don't regard that as something wrong, but do remember that you're not on your own. And the other thing I want to say is this. We tend to hide our depression, don't we? Now, when I was... your kind deacon spoke to me this morning, how was I? I said I was fine. Now, I happen to be fine today, but I'd always say that, wouldn't I? I'm fine, thank you. It ain't always true. Can I urge myself and others, if we do have periods of doubt, uncertainty, depression, then share them. Tell somebody. The Christian church is all about sharing with needs and sharing and caring. And to keep them to yourselves simply makes the depression worse. Now, thirdly, there's a story of Naboth's vineyard, which I didn't read this morning. Can I quickly remind you of that story? Naboth had a vineyard, and Ahab wanted it. He wanted it for his own purposes. Now, not like today, he couldn't have gone to Goadsby's and put it on the open market, because it was special land given by God and had to be passed on to the family. So Naboth couldn't sell it even though Ahab would have bought it. So we've got there a dilemma. Naboth has a vineyard, Ahab wants it, but he can't have it. So what happens? In marches Jezebel. And I have to say she's the baddie on this story. She said, "Don't be daft, Ahab. If you want it, you're the king, mate, you have it." So she arranged for Naboth to be put to death, and he was, and then Ahab took the vineyard. And then you may remember that Elijah challenged him with the story, and Ahab realized that he'd done something wrong. Now, what is there about that? Well, let's be careful, but surely we should recognize that greed is wrong, and Ahab in his greed did something wrong and was punished. So there's Elijah for you, and I want just before we've got time, just briefly to refer to his follower Elisha. Now Elisha was the younger member; he was the younger prophet, and you may remember that Elijah went to heaven in a chariot of fire. Whether that was a vision or not, I don't know. I'll leave that with you to think out. And the cloak fell on Elisha. And Elisha prayed that he'd have twice the amount of wisdom that Elijah had had. And I suppose the 2 main stories that we know about Elisha are the healing of Naaman. You remember the story? How that Naaman, his great captain, Syria, had leprosy, and the servant girl, who was very insignificant in their culture, she was brave enough to tell her mistress that she knew of a prophet who could heal. And whatever her name was, we don't know, but she's the champion in this story, isn't she? Because as she told her mistress about Elisha, and Naaman went to Elisha, and he got a bit of a shock, because when he got there, Elisha didn't even come out and greet him. He just told him to do something rather nasty, to go and wash in the River Jordan 7 times. And he took the umph because he thought that he was a very important bloke and that Elisha should have come out to him. Well, finally, as you may remember, he took sense and was healed. And the story there. Now, the other story, which is a difficult one, isn't it? The story of the boys who shouted at Elisha, "Oh, Baldy!" And out came the bears and mauled them. Now, interestingly enough, even what's his name? Jeff Lucas says this is a difficult one, and I don't know the answer to it, but there you go. I'll leave that one with you. Now, what can we learn from today? Well, first of all, I have to bring to you again a challenge. If it's Baal, it's not Baal. If it's materialism, serve that. If it's living in today's culture and melting into today's culture and not thinking, or are we servants of God who believe in a God of miracles? Now, I long for more miracles. And interestingly enough, again, I'd like to read from Jeff. For over 4 decades, I have believed that God is still working miracles today. His power has not ceased, and there's not a shred of evidence in the New Testament to suggest that it will do. But, to be honest, says Jeff, I have not seen as much of the miraculous as I'd hoped. Too often, the supernatural has been hijacked by silliness with extreme claims that turned out to be false. Well, I'll leave that with you. But we believe in a God who is great. We say that and we believe it. How much do we really, honestly accept that is true? Or is our God too small? I think that was a J.B. Phillips phrase, wasn't it? J.B. Phillips, you may remember, who did the well-known modern translation, wrote them in Swanage. How big is my faith? Or is our faith something we bring out on Sunday mornings and forget it until next Sunday? Our God is great. It was a great Baptist missionary, William Carey, who said, attempt great things for God, expect great things from God. Do we? Do we look for miracles? And secondly, may I remind us all that we've all failed. I've certainly failed. But we have a God who forgives, and we need not be depressed and feel that we've done wrong. And thirdly, I come back to where we started. Let's be willing to think Christianly about some of today's massive moral dilemmas. Care Trust, the Christian Institute do. And you may remember that it was the Christian Institute, wasn't it, who took to court, who, remember the story of the Belfast baker, who refused to make a cake saying something positive about a gay couple. And they were taken to court, and the Christian Institute, in fact, defended them, and they won the case. But there are issues around. The nurse who wore a cross and was told she wasn't allowed to. And you don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 years. There was quite a furore, 2 or 3 years ago, about some school, I think it was in the Midlands, that wasn't allowed to keep Christmas because it was Christian. Had you been headmaster, mistress, master, what would you have done? Would you have said, all right, we'll call it Winter Mass? But no, Christmas is all about the birth of Jesus Christ. That's the historical fact. And kids in our schools need to hear that. Issues will come. And I'm asking us all just to go on thinking Christianly and, if necessary, taking action about it. Let's pray. Father, a lot to think about this morning, a lot of questions, partly unanswered, but we come to a great God who, creator, and also our Father. And so I bring to you this morning our fellowship here at the United Reformed Church in Swanage. Give us again a bigger vision of who you are. Increase our faith and our trust in you. And like William Carey, can we expect great things from you? We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.